We are back with another podcast, whether or not and to what degree. And I'm First Alert Chief Meteorologist Kendra Kent alongside Adam McWilliams.
Hello.
And so glad that we get to sit here and talk about severe weather.
I know, our favorite subject.
Yeah, we don't like severe weather that causes a lot of grief, but both of us have talked about it's really the reason that both of us got into this profession.
Exactly, and this is my first severe weather season in the Carolinas.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. We already had kind of one severe weather event earlier.
Yeah.
Had a line of storms come through. Brief tornado warning in northeast Georgia, but luckily no damage or anything like that. But
right.
yeah, you know, it just kind of just a line of little storms swung through, and that was it.
Well, and that's, you know, being from Jackson, just
right.
a little background on you. If you didn't watch the podcast, watch the one before this, because that's where you get to know Adam even better. He's our newest team member.
Yeah.
You know, same with here. There really is no time when you can say severe weather isn't going to happen.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, winter,
absolutely.
It can happen in January, it can happen anyway.
Right.
But our most likely time to get tornadoes, you know, widespread damaging wind is coming up as we get into March, April, and then a good chunk of May. Then we shift into a different kind of severe weather season in the summertime.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about more of that, like, you know, those severe thunderstorms with the hail and the strong wind and all that. We have the map up right here. Kind of this is the temperature outlook, April through June. And really this is going to be looking at warmer than average conditions. Again, we are in a La Nina. And so a La Nina does mean that we usually have warmer and wetter, warmer and drier, I should say, weather here in the Carolinas.
That's right. And, you know, with warmer than average weather, that inherently sets us up for a little bit more severe weather. Right. It gives the energy for severe weather.
Right.
Now, we can click to the next slide and show you that we're actually expecting a fairly average precipitation outlook. It's going to be a little wetter than normal up to the north, which makes sense. In La Nina patterns, you get a more amplified pattern, more active jet stream. You don't get as active of a subtropical jet. So down near the Gulf, you're not going to be a lot wetter than normal, but probably about average from New Orleans up to where we are. But it's those systems that do come with the polar jet dipping down.
Right.
Those can often be some of the biggest severe weather producers for the southeast.
Well, because you have such a sharp temperature gradient. You're going from really cold to really hot. And if you remember, 2011 was a La Nina year.
Yeah.
And we had that outbreak of supercells and tornadoes in the deep south. Also, too,
I forgot that was La Nina year.
Yeah, it was a La Nina. Yeah, it was a La Nina year. And also, we have to think of the placement of the jet stream, where the jet stream begins to pull up. You know, you have that trough in the jet stream, where it begins to go into a ridge. That is usually the area where we can see really big severe weather outbreaks because you have that wind energy that's always right there. So it was always interesting to see in years where we thought we would have a good severe weather season, that jet stream is just a little bit further to the west or a little bit further to the east, a little bit too far away from us. So the placement of that jet stream is going to be really key, I think, as well with the severe weather season.
Well, and so often areas in the deep south, you know, we're talking about what they called, you know, Dixie Alley,
right.
Parts of Arkansas into Mississippi, Alabama, end up being the bullseye for often multiple days of severe weather some weeks.
Right.
I mean, it's crazy. And then what we'll get sometimes for us, we'll either get what's left of that or we end up getting saved by cool air damming, which often happens for us during this time of year. We'll have a you know, more stable layer that develops right along the edge of the mountains, which is really what saved us in 2011, April 27th, when the Tuscaloosa tornado. Also the fact that night fell, and that also helped us a great deal.
Right.
But I mean, those storms were still powerful, even going through Georgia, but we were saved by having that more stable layer. But we can't always count on that. And there's certainly the potential to see anything like what we had back in 2020. We had an EF3 tornado hit Seneca, and that was during, you know, again, a particularly active severe weather season. So this season looks like a fairly average one at this point, but it's going to really be a week-by-week basis. You know, we looked at the winter weather outlook, and on paper, because it was La Nina, warmer and drier than average.
But look at what we got.
Yeah. I mean,
the exact opposite.
Yeah. I mean, we had we had 3 legitimate rounds of snow. They weren't huge, but we had 3 you know, and then we hadn't gotten any of that in 3 years.
I know.
So it's just all about how things set up at certain moments. But if you look at our winter as a whole, it'll be interesting to look back at all 3 months, but overall it was not brutally cold, and we didn't get a whole lot of rain. But we did have those opportunities for winter weather.
Well, and we can look at outlooks. We can look at patterns. We can look at markers. We can look at, teleconnections and all that kind of stuff. But I really think it comes down, like you said, Kendra, to those very subtle kind of mesoscale, what we call mesoscale, basically
smaller scale,
smaller scale features, and that can really determine, make all the difference in what type of weather we see. And these long-term climate models that people put out there don't take that into account.
Yeah.
They just kind of look at the overall big picture, a broad brush, and say, well, historically, when we have had, these patterns in place, we get more severe weather, we get less severe weather. But like you said, it really comes down to those really finite, smaller scale features that can really make all the difference for us.
Well, like they say with hurricane season, you can forecast a tamer season, but all it takes is one.
Right, exactly.
And same with a severe weather event. So let's go to the next slide. And again, if you're just listening here, what we're looking at is a map that essentially shows our area in a bullseye for severe wind days or severe wind events. This is showing anywhere from about 6 to 8 days where our area gets wind damage, significant wind over 60 miles an hour, and we often have that in the months of June, July, and August. So this is not even really technically in severe weather season, but goes to show you we see a lot of damaging wind events. So whenever there's a severe thunderstorm warning, you have to take it seriously. I think that it doesn't hold the same weight and doesn't necessarily need to as a tornado warning, but there are certain severe warnings that do.
Absolutely.
And luckily nowadays they have those tags for them. We'll let you know if there's a severe thunderstorm warning that is a considerable, that's a destructive. There's different levels of those that at least we can warn the public about, and that's our biggest job when we're covering these.
And also too, I think we should mention that if the destructive tag gets put on a severe thunderstorm warning, your phones will go off as if it is a tornado warning.
Correct.
Your phone, your WIAs, what they call wireless emergency alerts, your WIAs on your phone will go off. And that is a particularly dangerous situation. That is when you have winds of 80 miles per hour, or I believe over 2.5 or 3 inch hail. That is considered destructive severe thunderstorms. So I'm glad that we have the threat levels, because again, like you said, not all severe thunderstorms are equal.
Exactly. You'll get some in the summertime that pop up that maybe have some brief strong wind, but then sometimes you'll get those that tap into enough dry air aloft to create a microburst. And that's one thing that throughout the Severe Weather Awareness Week we're going to be explaining. And you can go to foxcarolina.com to see all of our explainers. It's a really great little segment of our website for Severe Weather Awareness Week. So especially if your kids are super into weather, we're going to have a lot of tornado demos. I know you went into your own home and showed good places to go if there's a tornado warning.
Absolutely. And that, when we were talking about it, and it's an interesting statistic here in the upstate, 50% of people that live in Greenville are not from Greenville. They're from other parts of the country. And so other parts of the country do not receive as much severe weather as we do, particularly the Northeast, the Northwest, and so people may come down here and tornado warning is issued and they don't know what to do. They're going to start freaking out. They don't know what to do. So I think it's really important to remind people, not everybody is from here, and, a lot of people have weather anxiety, and so to be able to tell people what they can do so they can go ahead now and have a plan in place. You're not fretting over it. You're not, staying up at night thinking about it, but you have a plan. You know what you're going to do.
Absolutely.
And, if we can give you 15 minutes, if you don't know what you're doing, 15 minutes is not nearly enough time. But if you know exactly what to do, that's plenty of time to get in there and get to safety.
Yeah, all about having that plan ahead of time. So
exactly.
The other thing we want to talk about is the tornado frequency during going through the different months. You can kind of see when it peaks, and that's toward March, April, and May. Now, May is more typical of your traditional tornado alley, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Kansas. People will go storm chasing up in May in those areas. We're more skewed toward the March, April, but there really is a big peak in tornadoes there So that's one of the reasons that we really consider March, April, May our severe weather season, because the tornado threat is the greatest. The reason in the summertime it goes down is the jet stream retreats north. So you just don't have as many elements to create that turning of the winds, but you still have all the elements for wind and even potentially hail into the summertime.
And I think too, we should also mention, even though there are tornadoes in like June, July, August, September, those are mainly from tropical events.
It's a great point. Yeah. And that's a very different kind of tornado.
And that's a very different kind of tornado. They're usually weaker. They're usually not those big, strong supercell hook echo thunderstorms that we see. They're in these rain bands that come through, and a lot of wind with the overall system spinning, and so it doesn't really take much to get those little rain bands to produce tropical tornadoes.
Oh, I mean, I'll never forget. Tropical Storm Fred had a big impact on our area, primarily the flooding that it caused in the mountains. But I'll never forget the day it moved through, because I believe we had 30 tornado warnings in the upstate.
That's an outbreak.
I mean, but you know what's crazy about it is I think maybe 1 or 2 actually were ground verified. But there was so much rotation within those storms that National Weather Service had to issue. It's the only thing you can do when you're dealing with that situation. But we get a lot of that kind of stuff in the summertime, especially if we get a Gulf storm coming up. We end up on that the right versus left, right side of the storm, and that'll often bring us that kind of weather. So again, we're going to be going through Severe Weather Awareness Week. We're going to wrap up in a second, but did want to ask, obviously you went through many years in Jackson covering severe weather. What was one of your more memorable times covering tornadoes there?
So it has to be Easter of 2020. We had a pretty violent outbreak in Mississippi. We had, at one time, we had 2 EF4 tornadoes on the ground at the same time. They were going in parallel tracks. One of them broke the national record for the widest tornado ever observed or measured, of 2.75 miles wide is what the Weather Service measured the width of the tornado as. And it was a high-end EF4, so it had winds about 190 miles per hour. And the second one, the one on the parallel track, was violent in its own right because it went through the little town called Soso, Mississippi in Jones County, and really did a lot of damage there. So that was probably the most memorable that I can remember. It was just mind-boggling to me that I had 2 wedges on the ground, not even 25 miles apart, going on parallel tracks. I mean, that was really a wild day, but we had all those ingredients in place. All our parameters were just off the charts.
Well, and if I recall, that day was similar to, for us, we had several days advance notice, thankfully, and that's what we're always going to be bringing you, is that advance notice. If we're looking at any kind of big severe weather day, I'll never forget a lot of events. Fort Smith, Arkansas, when we were covering an event, had to actually take shelter while we were in the studio.
Oh, that's wild.
I get asked that a lot at school visits. What happens if you're covering a tornado, but then a tornado hits the station or something like that?
We take cover too.
You have to take cover, and we have a shelter here. You just have to go into the hallway or bathroom around the corner, and that includes me. Eventually, I'd have to get off the green wall. We had one situation a couple years ago where I stayed in the studio as everyone in the station sheltered, and we were watching it. If it got any closer, I would have gone into shelter too. But of course, I was watching it. I knew exactly where it was. But those have to be, for me, when covering it, the most memorable. But I also remember back in 2010, when a tornado went right through downtown Easley. And we were covering that on the air, and that was a really scary moment, just because when a tornado's and we saw the debris, we had reports of the tornado on the ground, and knowing that it was going through around 6 p.m. So just a really scary time. Thankfully, no one was hurt, no one died. There was a lot of damage, but it was one that I'll never forget. But it hits you emotionally and also just professionally as moments where you just want to make sure that you do the best you can.
When they really get through populated areas is when bad stuff happens. Right when you have those tornadoes that go right through cities, I mean, that's always your worst case scenario.
It is.
It really is.
And you grew up in Jackson, so
Absolutely.
covering these tornadoes, you probably knew people that were in these communities that you were tracking from childhood. So
exactly.
that I can imagine being, really, really
You're
tough.
on the phone texting them, take cover now, in all caps, and like 5 exclamation points. So it can get intense at times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's the wonders of severe weather, and we're always going to be there for
That's
you.
right.
Is the big takeaway message here. And we're going to be throughout Severe Weather Awareness Week, bringing you more and more on air, online. So be sure to check it out. Again, we're expecting kind of an average severe weather season,
Average
but
those
can be busy ones.
It just takes one, like you said, just takes one.
It does, and I'm grateful to have you with your experience here with our team
I'm
help
happy
this
to be
year.
here. Thank
and
you.
We will be on top of it, bringing you that first alert. That's why it's important to pay attention to those first alert weather days, especially during March and April, because if we see that severe weather threat, we will absolutely have our app too. If you don't, First Fox Carolina First Alert Weather app, and we can keep you safe ahead of any severe weather. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back with you soon.